Hey everyone, welcome back to Admix for another episode of Giving the Game Away. And today, Ian and I are going to talk about how to use data to decide what games to build. What an exciting topic.
It is. Data is one of those things that terrifies me and really excites me. A lot like most things in life, I'm a very nervous man. Data is huge. I think 2016 was sort of the onset of the data generation. And now it defines so much about our lives, like the things that you buy based on what's marketed towards you, based on what you browse. And we've spoken in the past about gate tracking in VR, being able to track individual players based on how they move their heads and stuff like that. It's all data. I think 90% of all data has been created since 2016, which is a fun stat for you. Baffling
every year,
as well.
every 18 months, and there's more data created than ever before from the beginning of times. So, just we're tracking more things. Everything has sensors. It's just creating extra data points, but doesn't mean that it's always smart data, because you need to be able to interpret it as well. Yeah,
of course. Just a final little fact, because I've written it down, I want to tell it. By 2025, we're expected to be providing data to a device every 18 seconds, which is absolutely insane. And data is one of those things that is scary because privacy and individual needs and all of that, but it's also not scary. There is a good way to use data, and there's a nice way to use data that isn't infringing anything. I mean, we could get into the whole privacy concerns surrounding data with Facebook and Oculus Quest 2, but that's its own topic.
Different topic.
Which I would love to talk about. I'm very hyped about the Oculus Quest 2. But this is all about using data for game dev needs. And this is a topic that so many people have written about and approached, but from different perspectives. Choosing what game to make next is really hard because ideas are cheap. They're a dime a dozen, but knowing which ones are worth anything, worth pursuing, worth putting your time into is really difficult. Other people have like measurement metrics where they assess it based on company vision and stuff like that. But we think, or at least I think, looking externally into the market and where there's a good gap that you can slot into, I think that's a really smart way of choosing what game to make. I mean,
absolutely.
You develop games, Sam. How did you choose those ideas? What was your process before we get into this?
Yeah, I mean, the first time, I didn't know any of this. This was, just I wanted to build games. And so I started by building things that I thought were cool and different. And a few of those ideas actually end up working. But eventually you start to realize that you kind of need to, there's just so many developers, right? So it's very rare that if you have an idea that is totally different. So actually looking at what has worked, what has not worked, is really helpful. And I think even though we're going to talk about, the hardcore data kind of analysis, I think we need to remember that it needs to be both. You cannot only build games based on data, although hyper casual games are getting very, very close to that. Almost forgetting about the concept and the art of games, really. But I think it needs to be both. And so you can have an amazing idea, a concept that is different, but still try to look for mechanics or categories that are more likely to work rather than others. I think this is more and more important. When I was building my first game in 2013, the App Store was nowhere near as crowded as it is today. So it was still possible to be the first to do something. And in fact, we were the first one to publish a arcade trading game. So it was trading, like binary trading, but with a fake stock. And so you would just play against your friends and make virtual money, and you could use that to buy gifts, blah, blah, blah. Today, there's probably 1,000 clones of those. Some of them much more successful than the app we actually built. So, using data is becoming more and more important, and should definitely be on your radar if you're a game developer.
Absolutely. It's one of those things that sort of separates the mobile market from the general indie market. I think indie, as long as you're still really putting a lot of energy into marketing and stuff like that, If the idea and the execution's nice, then it's probably pretty good. Whereas the mobile market is very crowded, especially with free-to-play being the thing that it is. So finding your niche is really important. We've spoken about niches so many times, but it really is important.
At the end of the day, it's almost pleasing or finding a loophole in either Google or Apple, right?
Yeah.
Because they control the distribution. So understanding what is popular from their point of view, what are the things that they're more likely to feature? What are the things that people actually download? If they download it, is it profitable? We'll touch upon all of these topics, but it's it's a minefield, right? It could you can keep looking at it and keep analyzing that data for days, for months even, because there's just so much data coming back from the marketplace.
There is. At a certain point, you do need to take a bit of a plunge. This conversation is entirely about making that as informed a plunge as possible. Just like investing in stocks, it's all about making smart bets, but not really betting. So we'll briefly touch on a few tools. There's so many vendors out there that will give you data on the mobile game market. A few of our favorites include Apptopia, which is very nice. Can be a little bit pricey, but it's really nice for broad market analysis. They've got a very good blog for this stuff as well. App Annie, which is also really good, fantastic blog. I'm a big blog man. So
that's why we hired you.
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. That was on my CV. They've got really good data for individual apps, but their broad market intelligence is slightly less accurate, not less accurate, but less invested in. No free trial, but really useful stuff in there. Sensor Tower is a really good one too. Sensor Tower is especially good for keyword analysis, seeing keyword trends on the App Store, which is really important. We'll get into that further on.
Conversion as well.
Yeah, exactly. Super important for keyword analysis, stuff like that.
By the way, this blog is not sponsored by any of these companies. This is just our opinion and tools that we use internally and that we have used as game developers ourselves.
Yeah. But I would happily take some money on the sly if anyone's listening. Anyway, all of these tools have their strengths and weaknesses. We recommend using a lot of them together because it sort of becomes an echo chamber. If you're seeing one set of data, it's very easy to get tricked into thinking that there is one version of reality. But if you cross-reference and you compare and you use the strengths and weaknesses of different ones, then you're in a really good place. You get a good, accurate representation of the market as it is. So step one in using data to figure out what game to make next, and this is assuming that you've already sort of have a vague idea of the game you kind of want. You're sort of theory checking it now. You've had an idea and now you want to see if it's viable. You have to make sure you even have a chance in the niche that you're thinking about. Let's
give an example of Let's give an example of what we mean by niche here.
Exactly. So, say you're thinking about making a game about what would be a good example? Because my mind is going straight to Minecraft, and it's such a generic example. Say you want to make a match 3 game involving fish.
Or candy.
Or candy. Fish. We're doing the sushi version of match 3. Match 3 is a genre where it's very much a winner takes all. It's a winner takes all battlefield. There are big names in match 3, and it's really hard to compete with them if you're going straight down the match 3 route. So while we've got a little bit of a niche in this fish thing, the fish angle, it's probably not going to cut through the noise. It's really hard. For example, Match to Mansion, Candy Crush, huge names in the area, all generating massive amounts of revenue. And the real nuance of this, though, is that the tools above will show you market data for different countries. And while Match 3 is probably a bad example because it's almost guaranteed that there is a dominant player in every market out there, there might be a niche that you could find. So maybe Germany hasn't really found its match 3 fish game yet, and that could be something you aggressively market towards. So on the whole, you're basically looking to see if there are really big names in the space that you just can't compete with because they've got more money to acquire users and they've got more marketing budget and they've had much longer development times. And you're just trying to see if you can even compete.
So then, let's say you are looking for a truck design / racing game. Okay. How would you even go about finding niche? So you go to Apptopia, you see, okay, there's nothing that looks like a massive company regarding those keywords. So what are you looking for exactly? Are you still looking to see that there is a lot of small, similar type of games, or no games at all? Where do you draw the line?
Both of those are actually beneficial. One of them's better than the other. So if there's no games at all that are like generating any kind of downloads or sales or anything like that, that's probably a bad sign for it. Possibly a bad sign.
Surely it has been tried at some point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is something that has been tried and possibly failed. If there's nothing at all on there, then it might be something to take the plunge on. Best case scenario is that there are lots of apps with similar amounts of downloads, ideally like over 100K. And none of them are dominant. No one is like the winner in the category, but it means that there is a big interest and it's something that you can find a niche within. Maybe it's a genre you can incorporate, but put a different spin on to just capture those users. Yeah, it's a good sign. It just means there's going to be a bit of competition and you need to really think about your position in this market so that you can capture some of that audience. This is when we get into the whole multi-genre conversation that we had last time.
Yeah. And you can try then to create something a bit different if you see that there is traffic for this trucking game, but they do not enable you to customize your truck, for example. Then that could be a differentiating feature, but at least you know that there is a strong demand for that particular type of games.
Exactly, which is really useful. Which takes us on to step 2, identifying that demand. Does that niche get a lot of organic traffic? Because that will be a huge factor in the success of your game, especially if you don't have a big user acquisition budget, which a lot of indies don't. And that's just the reality of passion projects and trying to make a business out of nothing. It's the hustle. So from step 1, hopefully you've identified a few good niches. You've theory checked a few places. There are gaps. There's demand. You know what the direction you're going in, but now you need to know how niche they are. Is there any organic traffic to them? App Annie and Sensor Tower are really good at how often people search within those niches. So you can see which apps are doing well, what their keywords are, how many people are actually searching. Because if there's downloads but no one is actually searching, it might be the case that those downloads have come from a really long time period, and it's going to be difficult to make a success within that niche.
Yeah, or user acquisition.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
they might be channels.
They might be paying massively through different channels instead of getting organic traffic. And organic traffic, as I said, is going to be really important. So you've got maybe a couple niches now that really appealing. There's organic traffic, there's a user base, there's demand. Now you want to get into a bit more analysis of whether it's worth it. So figure out how the niche monetizes, so you can get into monetization design and see if developing this game will make it profitable, will be worth investing in. So have a look at games in the genre, and any of the tools we spoke about before will help you do this. Keyword analysis, user bases, all that jazz. Download a few of them. Have a look at how they're being monetized. Do they use interstitials, banner ads, in-app purchases? Are they really playing on high retention and trying to convert users, or are they very hyper casual in their nature and just getting through them as fast as possible? For example, if it is a really hyper casual area that you're interested in, a hyper casual dominated niche, then you're probably going to need a user acquisition budget at some point, because that's just the nature of that side of things. And there's lots of guides about this out there in various ways. Yeah. Although it's worth noting that if it's an area dominated by really long user retention or heavy in-app purchases, then there is every chance that the big names in that space will just have a big budget. You can't compete with something like Game of War in terms of user acquisition because they have the money for it.
Yeah, I think that's the key part, right? The business model that you spot while playing the game. Do you see more ads? Do you see more purchases? This is directly linked with the retention, and the longer the retention, the longer the larger the lifetime value you can estimate, because people have more time and they build more excitement towards the game. They're more likely to buy things, and because of that, if the average revenue per user is high, then the publisher can probably afford to do a lot of user acquisition because they can spend more to get a user if they know they're going to make the money back. So that means that in one sense, it's great. I mean, if you're able to build a game like this is a cash cow. At the same time, it means that the acquisition is probably going to be pretty competitive. And especially if you don't have a high budget, then you better go on the other side, which is shorter retention and more organic type of acquisition.
Absolutely. It's as simple as that. So if you are spending money on acquisition, this is like a sub-step. You need to figure out how much you should actually be spending. And lots of ways to see this, again, vaguely based on genre and monetization method. Also worth noting that you might be able to find a niche within monetization methods themselves. So if a genre is dominated by banner ads, I'm not sure if there is one, but God help us if there is, you might be able to stand out by having really non-intrusive advertising, like in-play ads or something similar. Anyway, user acquisition, you need to know how much you should actually budget, and that is very based on genre. So as Sam was saying before, games with very long retention tend to push for in-app purchases, but they tend to have a smaller market in general. So hardcore strategy games like Game of War, they have a small audience, so they have to spend more to get that audience, whereas hyper-casual games have a very broad audience, so they don't have to spend as much. Trying to figure out if you can actually afford to acquire users through money in your space is also worth knowing if that is part of your strategy. If it's not, and you're trying to go purely on organic traffic, you can kind of disregard this step as long as the previous steps have come up with really like high organic traffic areas. It's just something worth knowing if you've got your producer hat on. And next, you need to know if apps in the genre or niche you're looking at are often featured or trending. It seems kind of counterintuitive, but you actually want fewer apps in your niche trending in the top charts of app stores. Generally, when apps get featured, they have a lot of ad traffic directing users to them, which leads to lots of active users and lots of reviews and lots of attention. It's a really virtuous cycle, but it is one that you need a budget to make happen. Whereas if there aren't too many featured games within that niche, if there isn't like a top one every other week, it probably means that it's a more level playing field. There isn't a big name in the space just
more organic.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where App Store optimization is really important. We've mentioned it before. Again, it really deserves its own podcast. It's like search engine optimization, but for app stores. It's the practice of making your description really ping for important keywords, make your imagery look really premium and attractive, make sure your metadata, like the genre is accurate and targeted really well. Really,
this can make all the difference. There are some case studies online of just swapping the profile picture of the app picture, and all of a sudden the app gets downloaded. Why? You don't know. This is just people respond better to it, right? And so A/B testing, optimizing, trying different things is definitely key at that stage to make sure that you get the most of your app.
Exactly. Yeah, experimenting is really important. It's like you can sort of generate your own data, which brings us on to step 6, which is you have now developed and released a game. You found your niche, you've tracked keywords, you've optimized your app store posting as much as you can, and now you are ready for success. You're going to hit the town. But when you're relying on organic traffic, you shouldn't expect it immediately. Just look at Among Us. It came out to very moderate success 2 years ago, and suddenly went up and made 75% of its revenue in 45 days. It's crazy. There are ways that you can get around that. Entirely separate topic, which we'll get onto one day. But you can work on building a brand as an indie dev before this. Engaging people online, trying to get a following, which is, costs nothing except for time, and that will help build organic traffic early on. But it's hard to guarantee. That's why optimization is really important. So look at your images, change them out, follow your app on all of the tools we spoke about before, like follow your app on App Annie and Sensor and stuff like this. See if there's anything you can change. Then change stuff and see if it gets better, because there is always going to be some sort of optimization there. Make sure that you're tagging the right keywords. See if you've probably done it right, but make sure it's actually working. That's important. There's lots of stories out there to give like nitty-gritty on this, but you have to keep changing little things and optimizing little things, because one of those little things might drive your app into huge revenue, and you can't even anticipate it. You couldn't predict it. Yeah,
I think the key when testing is obviously testing one thing at a time, so that you know what has affected the change. If you change 10 things and something happens, then you might get the wrong idea related to what actually was the cause of that change. So just have a schedule, testing one thing at a time. But again, as we said, that is one part of it. The other part remains about the creativity, the story, how nice your game is to play. It's not all about data. I believe that a lot of what makes games special is really the arts and the part that cannot really be quantified. But definitely more and more data is making its place. And especially if you want to launch a high volume of games, you definitely have to follow those steps.
For sure. You really do. Especially like optimizing based on current trends and stuff like that. The artistry is important. I can't reiterate that enough. You're exactly right, Sam. Like you have to be getting good reviews. People have to like playing your game. Otherwise, it's never going to spread and it will fizzle out pretty quickly. Data is really powerful. Data will guide you, but it shouldn't be it's not the sail that steers your ship. You need to build the sail, and data will be the wind that guides you somewhere.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Thank you very much. I'm a writer. There's always going to be a level of luck at the end of the day, but insight-led approaches, really investing in the research stage, that will put you in the best position for success. That will give you the best chance of getting lucky compared to doing nothing at all. Yeah, and that is how you use data to choose what game to make next.
Beautiful. We should definitely show some example and more research that we've done around the topic.
Absolutely.
That's great way to end it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed the 6 steps that we mentioned. Please follow us on all of your channels, Admix Play, and I will see you next week for another episode.